I like that, Randall. I'm going to kind of go steer off in different directions, just so, but bouncing off of some of the ideas mentioned. I do not have an MFA. I majored in English at Stanford University, class 81. I went to UCLA Law School for about 25 years. I've been a lawyer. For the last 20 years, I've been a lawyer with the California Department of Justice, and I'm a supervising attorney. So I supervise a group of lawyers in the consumer section. And what I often say when I review briefs is make it shorter. Tell a story because you're writing to a judge who happens to be a person, and don't bore them. And luckily we have some wonderful writers. And almost all lawyers who work under me love literature, and almost everyone has purchased one of these because they care about words and they care about, weighing each word and what is the right way to say this and what is the right way to get the reader, and in the case of lawyers, it's getting the judge and the law clerk or the research attorney to read, and we're writing all the way up to U.S. Supreme Court. So, you have to get those people to care about what you're dealing with. And, in terms of haiku versus hint fiction, I went to Wikipedia because I was trying to remember what I learned about haiku, and I didn't realize it's not that ancient. It's only a couple hundred years old. And at the time when it was created, it was considered quite avant-garde. And now we consider it, for some reason, kind of stuffy and structured. But I think I went to 12 years of Catholic school, and I can tell you I wrote many haiku because the nuns loved haiku. because the nuns, what they could do is they could get the kids to think about words in a structure, and the kids go to learn about syllables. They could think about titles. And then the nuns didn't have to spend too much time grading because there wasn't a lot to read. For my piece, I try to write a piece that was 25 words. In the first draft, I think it was like 53 words. And it took a couple hours at least to trim it down. Oh my God, I kept on doing the word, word count on the computer, and it's like, 28 words. And I finally, I got it to where I left it alone, and I came back. I didn't think it was going to be easy, but I didn't realize how hard it was going to be. But at the same time, it also gave you a sense of freedom because you had the structure. You knew what you had to do within that structure. And for some bizarre reason, at least to me, it gave some kind of creative freedom to do something kind of different and strange.
Going back to sort of about the 25-word limit, sometimes get asked about, why the 25 words? There's a thing out there called a drabble, which personally, I guess, is the English major to me. I've always been fascinated by the etymology of words, where things come up, who created the whole concept of flash fiction? Who created the whole subject fiction, microfiction, and then you get down to the drabble, which is supposed to be exactly 100 words, and then you get to the dribble, which is supposed to be 50 words. Exactly 50 words. So the 25 words it was the next logical step down, I guess. But it just feels better than, like, say, 27 words. But yes, a 27 word could still be considered hint fiction. In fact, I even think a 1,000-word story could be kind of a hint fiction. Every story in itself can continue on and on and on. The thing that, for me personally, that makes hint fiction what it is that it's complete. That you have the Hemingway story, you have that for sale baby shoes never worn. It's not a first sentence. It's not a sentence plucked from like a regular story. It is the story. It is those 6 words. It is the story. You can't add to. Of course you can add to it, but it stands alone. But yet it's it's hinting at something else, and that's obviously where the hint comes from. I know Randall just recently did an essay at Flash Fiction Net about the Hemingway piece. Do you want to talk? We can all talk about this. And basically, the reason the original essay came about was because people get very upset about this story. It seems like I've actually had online discussions that kind of grew very heated about this isn't a story, and then they would say this, and this, and then other people would say, oh yes it is because this is this. So, and I think it's interesting that the story kind of it makes people very passionate about this form. And again, there's no guarantee that between Hemingway stories, I think Randall might touch on. Will you?
I will now.
Okay, so why don't you talk briefly about that?
Yeah, so I was in a writing group, and whenever compressed fiction is mentioned, they often mention that Hemingway story. And so I just asked people as a question, what is the story of For Sale? You know, because everyone sort of says this is a great story, but I've never seen it really explain what the story is. And so people just said, it's really sad. There's this couple who lost this baby. And so I said, you know what's interesting? You know, it's interesting to me that they put the what do you make of the fact that they sell it? And someone said, so someone said the characterization of the couple as someone who would buy baby shoes before the baby's born says a lot about that couple. And I was thinking, yeah, like when my wife and when we were pregnant, well, she was pregnant. We wouldn't buy, I think it's our Jewish upbringing. We wouldn't buy anything, until the baby was actually born. That there is an innocence there. And to sell the baby shoes seems to be to say they're done with baby shoes now. So to me, that was sort of in talking with people about what their impressions were, I thought, to me, that's the interesting story that this was a couple who bought baby shoes before a baby was born, and now they're done buying baby shoes, and that was intensely sad to me. And then someone else said, well, why do you, and then other people had their other theories of why the baby might need new baby shoes. They were accidentally given an extra set. A baby was born with feet that were too big. It's a hippie couple who likes running around barefoot, and they were given this gift. And again, I think those are all possibilities. So, I think one of the things that's interesting about very short fiction is the way that it leaves space for the reader. And it kind of has to, because so much is implied. And I do think it probably goes into some theories of whose story is it? Is it the readers or the writers? And get those kinds of things. So I think people who think that it's the reader's job to create a story that is sort of set in stone, the responses that I got on this blog and discussion were, you're overanalyzing a story, you're making it, it's not really a story because there's so many interpretations, and Hemingway just did it as a joke. Didn't really mean to write it. He didn't really mean to write it as something that we would hold up on a pedestal as the paragon of some kind of form. He just did it as a bet to win some drinking money, those kinds of things. So I think that's always the case, even if you took something like a movie like in the popular culture, like The Matrix, and started studying it and explaining things. People will say it's just a movie. So one of the interesting things, though, is that Snopes, who snopes out these things, found an ad in 1945 in the for sale sign. It was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. There was actually an ad for baby shoes that were never worn, which is great. It was like for sale, lumber, an old car, baby shoes, size 2, never worn. And they thought it was just a coincidence that it was happening at the same time. But I thought that was interesting that there was an actual ad connected to it.
All right, Daniel, what do you know?
That's not, the saying, for sale, lumber, never used. I just...
You're right.
So
it was embedded.
It was embedded.
It was part of a longer story.
Right. What was the question? What the hell were we talking about?
What's going on about that Hemingway piece?
Oh, that were married. Yeah. My wife... well, I'm Chicano. I was raised Catholic, but my wife's Jewish, and I converted 22 years ago. So I have, I know some of this, and my wife and I have a 20-year-old son who's Jewish, Chicano, and gay, and an amazing guy, an anthropology major, and spent 10 days in Israel recently, and just really cool. After he was born, my wife had 7 miscarriages. And my wife's a lawyer. She's a judge now, actually. And she, being a litigator at the time, she would not give up. And if the last pregnancy had succeeded, we would have had 5-year-old twins running around. So the Hemingway story for me resonated in different ways because sometimes you get gifts, you get things, there are baby showers, or all kinds of things. And baby showers occur. So our last house that we sold 10 years ago, we had a room that was a baby room filled with baby stuff. That my wife closed the door on and never didn't want to go in there. And she hung on to all kinds of things, hoping that someday we'd be able to use it. And we never could. Finally, we gave up, and we sold the house, and we eventually gave away the crib and everything. We just gave it all away. So the Hemingway 6 words, it is a story. And it's okay if I bring a lot to it. There's nothing wrong. I think every great piece of literature is, well, whatever. I won't name books, but whatever favorite novel you have in your heart, you bring a lot to that novel. Because I guarantee you, okay, here's something. It's nice getting old for one reason. So I reread Mrs. Dalloway recently. I read it when I was 19 or something, and I read it again when I was 48. It was a different book. I promise you it was a different book. I reread The Portrait of the Artist. I read it when I was a kid. I read it again when I was 50. It was a totally different book. So we do bring a lot with us, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong. It doesn't make the thing we're reading less literature.
Roxane?
One of the things I always tell writers I often tell writers when I reject them is, sorry if I've rejected you, it's not personal. I tell them, trust the reader. Let the reader do a little work. I think a lot of times as writers we want to explain everything so that you understand exactly what I'm saying, and so that you get everything that I need you to get from my deep and spiritual story. And I think that with this story, is it a story? Absolutely. I don't know. I think it's insane that we're even discussing it. Is it a story? What is the meaning of life? I think that the fact that we're still talking about this 60 years later means that there's something there. Whether it's a story, a sentence, 6 words, a dribble, a drabble, blah, blah, blah. It has that idea. We're invested. We're engaged with it. To me, it's the saddest story. I think any woman can sort of listen to that and feel something. And so I'm engaged. I'm invested. I want to know what happened to the baby who did not wear those shoes, and what happened to the couple who had to sell those shoes or chose to sell those shoes. And so it's absolutely a story because I still care, and maybe we're still talking about it because Hemingway wrote it, because if I wrote it, we'd be like, whatever. But I think because Hemingway wrote it, we care, but that's the way the world works. We sort of follow the great words of great people. And so, yes, it's very much a story, and I would never debate it, ever.